So now that we've looked at a couple of different structural types of cells within the overall scheme of plant cells, we'll continue looking at plant cells by entitling this next flowchart Plant Cells 4. And what we're going to be focusing on is, of course, the idea of differentiated cells. I want to make sure that's still there. We're looking at very specialized cells, but now what we're looking at is specifically two different types of cells that will be considered water conducting. So water moving, water transporting cells that are going to be found of the xylem. So the xylem's job is to conduct water and dissolved material. It does this job with the help of two distinct type of cells within it. Now the one that we're going to spend the majority of this flowchart on is looking at the tracheids. So that's what we'll do here. Tracheids. So that's the water conducting cell that's found within the xylem. It has the following characteristics. So tracheids are cells that look like and act like the following. They are going to be dead and also quite hollow at maturity. And this is going to be exemplified by the fact that if you look at these under a microscope, all you're going to see of tracheids is the cell wall. So you only see a cell wall. These tracheid cells are going to be long and tapered at the ends. They will also possess secondary cell wall, and that's going to be with, of course, that very important polymer known as lignin. And what is that going to do? Immediately you should be thinking support, lignin support. In addition, so this is, remember how we said that anything that's of xylem or vascular tissue, the purpose of it is to transport and support. Look what we did here. Reason why it supports is because it consists of tracheids. Tracheids have secondary cell walls that have lignin that provide support. So we covered why vascular cells, vascular system supports because of this. And then finally, they also do the other thing. They transport. They also, in other words, tracheids conduct water. And when they conduct water, this is going to be upwards. What we mean by this is the fact that water is going to move upwards from, of course, the bottom, which would be the roots, from the roots, and then where would you go upwards? All the way to the above ground parts, the shoots. Okay, so this is kind of weirdly sort of pictured because I'm saying upwards, but there's a downwards arrow, but don't worry, we're just going from the roots to the shoots. You get the idea here. Now, another thing about this conduction of water, in addition to the fact that we have support by the tracheids, is the following. The movement of water, so the movement of H2O, as I like to abbreviate it, movement of H2O from a tracheid to another tracheid actually has to happen by I like to call them a mediator. So from tracheid to tracheid, each individual cell is mediated via these structures called pits. P-I-T-S. Pits. So what are pits? Pits are going to be things that are right in between these tracheid to tracheid interactions. This is going to be a thin area that's going to be located within the cell wall region. So it's a thin area in cell wall. It consists of just primary cell wall. It does not have no secondary cell wall. So pits have primary cell wall, no secondary cell wall. So they're probably going to be rather flexible. What's going to happen here is that the water specifically, because we're trying to conduct water and dissolved materials within tracheids as a part of xylem structure, the water passes through that primary cell wall. And that's how we have this movement from tracheid out to this pit, which will have the water go through the primary cell wall into another tracheid. Now, unfortunately, what this does, it's a bit inefficient because it actually slows down H2O movement, as we sort of have figured out through microscopic analysis. It slows down H2O movement, thus it's somewhat inefficient. And we're going to see a change in this lack of efficiency as we continue, because now what we're going to be looking at is not just the tracheids, but first of all, the tracheids are going to be, I would say, the chief the leading water conducting cells of a specific type of plant. Chief water conducting cells in gymnosperms. So gymnosperms are relatively, strong land plants, but they are, of course, lesser than their angiosperm counterparts in terms of evolutionary capabilities. Things like pines are gymnosperms, and pines will have tracheids within them, and also not just gymnosperms that have these tracheids, but also seedless vascular plants. Again, pretty old plants, pretty lesser plants, I would say, and these are things like ferns. So let me finish writing this, vascular plants, and those would be ferns. But what we see as another sort of advance in water conduction of the xylem, specifically at the cell level, would be not tracheids, but something known as vessel elements. And that would be actually found in angiosperms. So angiosperms have these other water conducting cells known as vessel elements. So let's write this down, vessel elements. So different type of a water conducting cell within the xylem, vessel elements. VEs for short is what I'll probably do from this point forward. Now, let's look at their characteristics and structure and function. They're dead and hollow at maturity, so that's a similarity, okay? Dead plus hollow at maturity, just like the tracheids. They're going to have secondary cell wall. They do have secondary cell wall here, and that would, of course, provide lignin as a strengthening polymer. Was that seen here? Yes, it was also seen within the tracheids, so that conserves, it stays. These are going to be actually quite short, the vessel elements. Over here, they're long and tapered, thus they provide support. Over here, they're shorter, and they actually don't provide a great amount of support because of their short stature. So we've lost that capability, and so what have we gained out of this loss? Out of this loss, what we've gained is the fact that vessel elements will have this very unique perforated structure, perforated morphology, I would say. And that would be because they're perforated in the sense that they have holes at each end of the cell. So each end of the cell is essentially open. There's a hole at each end, a perforation, and that's going to be important in water conduction, in water travel, because it's going to easily flow from one vessel element to another because of this perforation. There's also going to be, in terms of this idea of water flow, the idea of pits. There will be these pits in the side walls. So these are going to be also more openings within the side walls that allow for very consistent and successful lateral conduction, lateral transport of H2O. So here I would say we have sort of this vertical transport of H2O from end to end, and here we have side to side transport of H2O because of these pits, and these perforations will give us the end to end. Finally, in angiosperms, these vessel elements are going to be arranged very nicely in stacks. And when you have them arranged in these nice stacks, this is going to lead to something known as a vessel. That's when we call them vessels. Vessel elements put into stacks are called vessels. What's great about these is that they provide a very nice form of high-speed water conduction. Very, very high-speed water conduction. You have these openings, top and bottom, left and right, and so you get water that's going to move very, very efficiently. So it's very EFF for efficient. But the only stipulation is you absolutely need for this to work a continuous column of H2O. If you don't have this continuous column of H2O, this is not going to work well. And so what's going to happen is if the water isn't continuous, air may enter the system, it may enter the vessel elements, and if air enters, it will stop vessel function. Air will stop vessel function. So what you need is always water within these vessels, and you'll have nice water conduction. And that covers our water conducting cells of the xylem. We have tracheids, mainly in gymnosperms and seedless vascular plants. reline that, I should say. Those are pines and ferns, and this is the way that it works. And then we have angiosperms with the more advanced vessel elements. And this is all, of course, in order to transport and support the plant. Transport what? Transport water and dissolved materials.